Just wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Don. Welcome to Inside the Numbers, folks. And I am your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Let's dig a little bit deeper into Florida today. I don't know if anybody missed it over the weekend, but I get giddy over this stuff. I really do. Did you see how we were able to individually add the different responses, including demographics, to all the interviews and where people were in Florida? It was super cool. I want to drill into it a little bit more because as Florida Politics actually stated in their coverage of the poll, polling in Florida has been all over the place. All right. So we're a little bit now moving a little bit more towards Florida Atlantic University, but not quite there. But then we did collect more responses over the weekend, and we do intend to update the poll to show what we found. All right, because sample sizes in Florida, you know how I feel about them, especially Hispanics. They are a huge, huge subgroup in Florida, and they are very, very diverse. So you have to collect a significant number of those responses. And I figure while we're looking at it throughout a couple of days, we can see whether or not anything was statistical noise or not, even though obviously it was a big sample size that's much bigger than most media polls put out. But here we are, and we're going to drill down into it a little bit. We'll also look at, while everybody was focused on the debt ceiling and the negotiations and the deal that now is done, it's become law, everybody missed a bunch of really important economic news that came out last week. And yeah, there was some coverage of the jobs report, but what there wasn't coverage of was the revisions to labor productivity and cost. And I want to go over that for at least a little bit because it's significant and it's bad news. You cannot expect robust growth or even to prevent a deep recession with numbers like this. And the fact of the matter is, you always want to give these people the benefit of the doubt. They do it for a living. But BLS has been caught fudging data in the past. They did it in the report right before the re-election of Barack Obama. The Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Labor Department wanted to get the unemployment rate below a critical percent because, as people in my business said, nobody had ever been reelected with an unemployment rate at or above 7%. And miraculously, it fell below 7% the jobs report, the monthly report that came out right before the 2012 presidential election. And later, the New York Post reported that it was fudge. So anytime I see something like this, big revisions like this, my eyebrow goes up. The Bureau of Economic Analysis did this when President Trump first took office. The prior income and outlays had been revised so dramatically that basically all of the wage growth that we believed had been experienced under the last year of Barack Obama was not real. It was just, it was complete. It looked, revisions are revisions, but these were significant revisions. So much so, by the way, that the first 2 years of President Trump's administration, real wage growth exceeded any gain met under the entire Obama administration. Is more than that, actually. We did a report on it in People's Pundit Daily to show you it's a factor of, etc. So we want to keep our eye out every time we see something like this. Also, Chuck Todd's little over 3-minute delusion. I don't want to miss that. Something's probably going to get bumped because I do jumping on Poso at 2. So I'm going right from this to Jack Poso on Human Events to talk about the latest polling. So don't miss it. All right. But also, you know, the bottom line is something may wind up getting cut, and I don't really want some. I'm going to try to keep them smaller, the segment smaller, so we really don't miss anything, because something got cut last week that I at least want to touch on today, which is that there has been this pushback to people who have announced that we're going to do ballot harvesting in 2024. By the way, you may have noticed that YouTube has amended their community guidelines. Am I going to get those? Are those strikes going to be taken off of my, even though they fall off? Strikes fall off if you have good behavior throughout the time. But for a period of like a year and a half, more maybe, every time all the strikes fell off our community, they would hit us with another one of something so ridiculous. I remember the guys, Peter and George of the Gaggle. Love those guys. They used to come on, and I got strikes from simply them quoting Steve Bannon saying elections have consequences, stolen elections have whatever his quote is, you guys may remember, catastrophic consequences. I think it's something like that. And just because they quoted it, I got strikes for them back to back. And I wonder if those will be removed now that they have amended their community guidelines. But we'll see. All right. But in general, there's this pushback, and there's pushback from two different crowds. One is the crowd that says that's old, SQL technology, database technology, and the latency problems are so bad that it's not worth trying to beat them at their own game. We need to do like a real-time analysis of them because, for instance, you look in a state like Arizona and Georgia, there's such and such number. I think in Georgia it was like 60,000 inactive records that suddenly became active, cast a mail-in vote, then after the election were put back on the inactive status. I can actually address this real quick. I mean, first of all, why would you limit any tool in your toolbox? I mean, you want to do both, and good luck, more power to you. But if you don't fix the database latency issues and the incorrect, not only that, the structure of how Republicans do things, which is what I really want to talk about. All right, that now the RNC is saying we need money because we need to fix these problems. Well, Democrats, from everything that we have looked at, and we've only scratched the surface in telling you about, everything that we have looked at was not done by the DNC. It wasn't done centralized. It was given out to third party, very decentralized operation, given out to third party, all of whom cooperated with each other, all of whom worked to fix their latency issues. If there were records that they would update, it doesn't matter. It's not even an activist. It's some person they're paying $500 a week to go out in their local area and gather up absentee ballots. That would be entered into the nice little app they probably paid $2 million to make for each organization. And that would go into where they were sourcing it from. And so everyone would have more up-to-date information, but it didn't matter because it was so decentralized. Only these particular people having an area of responsibility would need to worry about their particular area having database latency problems. Once they fixed it, they would fix it and move on. And it's them. Maybe somebody else will use it down the road, but it's right there in front of them. So they already know. Ironically, Republicans, who are supposed to be all about decentralized government, want to centralize everything. And the truth is, the RNC and the NBC News report that came out last week, the RNC has major problems, not only with stuff we've already been talking about, like database latency issues, but straight up faking stuff. I mean, that was in the NBC report, and it's true. I never anticipated. I get a lot of crap over the years from other, people in the business saying, well, he works with a lot of left-wing vendors. So what? When it comes to my polling, I am not a partisan. I will throw no poll for nobody, and I don't care about any relationships, having to deal with who I'm getting data from. I want to work with the best vendors in the business, whether they're on the right or the left, because I want the most accurate data I can possibly get. And that obviously data in, if the data in is crap, the product that's coming out is going to be crap. I want the most accurate poll I can get. I like being percentage points under the sampling error. I like being tens of percentage points away from actual vote shares. I like that. I want to keep doing that. And I've gotten crap for using them. In the Republican world, what the NBC News report is showing you, in that whether you're a pollster, you're a door knocking company, whatever. It's like Don and I have this joke. I know a guy, because that's how it works. I know a guy. You need this? I know a guy. If you want help from the RNC, or at least, I'm not the RNC, the NRCC. If you want help from them, or at the very least, you don't want them to go after you, you better use some of their vendors. Well, unfortunately, because it's a very centralized system like that, the vendors aren't being challenged whether or not they're giving good quality product. There was even allegations in that report about door knocking firms, of which in the Republican world, there are only really like two major ones that everyone knows and like the approved, they're approved to use. There's allegations of faking knock data, meaning they went to the door, they knocked, they delivered the script, they took a survey, whether or not someone's on your side, not on your side. And I could tell you that all that absolutely is happening, because I could see more and more as time has gone on, people have come to us to do deduping or matching of their lists to see whether or not it's accurate or not. That never even intended to do that at Big Data Poll, but it's become something people ask us to do because the data is so bad. And I'm telling you, I routinely look at what they're knocking. They're saying they knocked on John Smith's door at 123 Main Street. And I'm telling you, that's impossible because John Smith hasn't lived there in 8 years. Now Jane Doe lives there. She's completely different registration, and she wouldn't have even been on your target list if you would have known that. No database is perfect, and everyone suffers from latency. But these problems are massive on the Republican side. So you have to clean that up first if they or anyone wants to build a that use this data as a foundation for something greater. You can't do it. It's like building a giant building on a broken cornerstone. Secondly, fine, use real-time data, knock yourself out. I just got a question for you. When you catch them casting inactive absentee ballots with inactive records, if that's, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that everything that's being argued is true. Who are you going to call? Who are you going to call? You're going to call the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger? You're going to call Adrian Fontes? That's out. So who else would you call? Let's see. Let's say it's even a red state governor. Ooh. Would Doug Ducey have done anything if you would have given that to Doug Ducey ahead of time? No. Would Brian Kemp? Mm-mm. So that leaves authorities, right? Like law enforcement authorities. The FBI, you're going to call the FBI? The Justice Department? The Justice, FBI is under Justice, but one agency and one bureau, one department and one bureau right now actively working to interfere yet with another election. You're going to call Merrick Garland and tell Merrick Garland that you found this suspicious, perhaps illegal activity? What's Merrick Garland going to do? What are you going to do? The only thing you can hope to do, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, Newt Gingrich on Mornings with Maria was actually closer to right than most people. The only thing you can do is take, like we have talked about before. Where's my little stack? It's over there. The pool of potentially fortified ballots. You need to make sure you go out and make that pool small as possible. As small as possible. And then you need to win by such a margin you covered. And then you can change whatever you want to change when you get in. But if Arizona in 2022 was not a warning for everyone who still refuses to acknowledge this has to be done, even Governor Ron DeSantis just came out over the weekend and said, oh, hell yeah, we're going to do it. So Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, other people the RNC is not the appropriate vehicle for this. So I don't know what they're doing. But they're all the major candidates are pushing doing it. Why does that matter? Because studies have shown, and polling data, we've shown you this. In 2020, we showed you this. Voters tend to vote. They vote based on the strategy that parties and leaders set forward. So if Donald Trump says, no, don't vote by absentee ballot, vote either in person or on election day, early in person or on election day, Republicans will do that, especially the RNC is behind it. If Democrats are united in saying vote early, vote by mail, that's what Democratic voters will do. They follow the strategy that their party sets out. So you're already going to see a change in behavior just from the two primary candidates in the Republican presidential nomination saying that this needs to be done. That's step one. So putting your head in the sand and ignoring it is not step two. All right, so that's more a little bit more about it. But we should read that NBC News article when we get a chance. And in fact, I actually may, because it is, I want to get into Florida a little bit more, and I don't want to miss what we're doing with Florida. But you know what? Let's really quick go over it. Just real quick, all right? We'll make it. I'll speed through something else if I have to. But this is important. Okay. Now, some of it take with a grain, some of it don't. We're going to do what we always do, which is read with an open mind, but with a guarded brain, right? By the way, 4patriots.com, promo code TPP10. Republicans are spending millions on turnout operations that are deeply flawed, insiders say. That's why we're losing elections, one Republican field veteran said of the conservative canvassing apparatus. Nobody wants to admit it. And there's also a matter of, again, the establishment plays a really bad role in this. Several seats were lost in 2022 because of these issues. The boxing out of certain vendors, the forcing to use other vendors, or the refusal to help if someone goes out and does their own thing. Like, for instance, Blake Masters really did try to do something new. At the end of the day, he was forced to let some of these establishment people in. He wanted help from the NRSC. Peter Thiel could not carry the load himself. So if you don't play nice with them, then that's what happens. If you're someone like Adam Laxalt and you seemingly have the support of every wing of the party, but you go diving in full-throated, all right, I'm going to use every single one of the establishment consulting classes apparatus, then you're going to be stuck with garbage. And here it is. A few weeks before last fall's midterm elections, a paid canvasser in Nevada did what thousands of door knockers across the country were doing. They went on an app and marked off the homes they had visited that day. There was just one problem. This canvasser never went anywhere near those homes in a neighborhood in South Las Vegas. They were 8 miles away, sitting inside Caesars Palace Casino, according to geo-tracking data obtained by NBC News. By the way, Laura, women have better intuition than men. I said this last week. I'm going to repeat it again. Laura has caught people doing the same thing. She would look over, be asked to look over some of the canvassing numbers or something. They did not look right. Laura would put her little Sherlock Holmes hat on and bust these people. She was right. They weren't actually knocking. The canvasser was working for an outside group backing GOP Senate candidate Adam Laxalt, who was seeking to topple one of the most vulnerable Democrat incumbents of the 2022 cycle. And by the way, again, if there was a turnout machine candidate, that race would have been won. But unfortunately for Adam Laxalt, he needed this apparatus. He is not a natural turnout machine. In fact, great guy apparently, but just not that. The canvasser was fired soon after the incident, according to two Republicans who worked on the canvassing effort. If this were an isolated episode, it'd be a minor nuisance, but it wasn't. It's not. The large-scale voter contact effort that conservatives have put at the center of their political operations in recent years is plagued with issues. According to more than a dozen people who've worked in GOP-aligned field operations and internal data obtained by NBC News. We all know who they're talking about. We all know the systems they're talking about. They're horrible. It cost $1 billion for junk. Those issues include fraudulent and untrustworthy data entries, akin to what occurred in Nevada, as well as allegations of lax hiring practices and a lack of accountability. Folks, for the most part, it's an ad that goes on Craigslist. They don't get training. They're like $13 an hour to knock on a door. Here, use Campaign Sidekick. That's our, congressional and Senate app. It's a joke. Issues with canvassing arose in two of the close, and by the way, there's others, but that's one of the main ones, especially congressional candidates use. Issues with canvassing arose in two of the closest losses of the 2020 election. And by the way, that's not any fault of the app. The app is actually a well-designed app. It's the sourced data that's in the app. 4 people familiar with those operations said they were Nevada, where Laxalt's narrow loss allowed Democrats to keep control of the Senate, and Georgia, where the GOP nominee for Senate, Herschel Walker, was ultimately defeated in a runoff election. Right, but in the first election, in the first round on election day, Walker could have and should have won that race outright. A half dozen Republican-aligned field operators working on various races in Nevada, Georgia, and Oregon said they encountered suspicious or fraudulent data, such as entries filed from homes that weren't visited or falsified surveys in 2022. And also, I'll just tell you this. In Georgia, Raphael Warnock was paying $40 an hour to have people go out and make sure that absentee ballots were requested, filled out, and sent back. That's just 3 states and groups supporting Warnock, by the way. But these individuals say those problems, as well as allegations raised in a recent lawsuit against one of the largest vendors in the conservative canvassing business, should raise internal alarms. These field operators said they've harbored similar concerns for multiple cycles, but only provided documentation for the most recent midterm. And that's because you really can't provide documentation. And once there's another cycle, that data is going to be basically overlapped, or, it's going to be stale or updated with even worse data. So you can't say this happened in this 2020, for instance, even though it most definitely did. And then think about this. If they're using these terrible data sets, this terrible information, to then make allegations of voter fraud, and then the media or Democrats finds a small little chink in your armor, then they paint you with a broad brush, and it's just garbage. I got to tell you, folks, I can't tell you how many records Laura and I went through after 2020. And people said, this is a fraudulent ballot. This is a fake ballot. And not that everything was on the up and up. It's just that all of the stuff that got attention, Laura and I could debunk in an hour. It just simply wasn't true. You have an individual search and a solid database, you could see what happened. And a general lack of understanding about how elections work and how voter rolls are maintained. That's just 3 states, but right, their problems are serious, as well as they raised in the recent laws. They've harbored the problem. 6 people said are pitfalls of the right's increased reliance on paid canvassers rather than volunteers, and on a sprawling web of vendors and consultants tasked with what can be a thankless, though critical job. 7 people said that cheating is on the rise amid pressure to quickly meet steep outreach goals. After several cycles of tough, sometimes close losses, the concerned operative said they believe it's time for party leaders to address what is happening on the ground. That's why we're losing elections. Nobody wants to admit it. There's only 2 ways to do this. Have a volunteer army that is truly, truly passionate about what they do, which is armed with accurate, sufficient tools to get their job done, or you pay very handsomely people who otherwise are not motivated to do it, must be motivated with money. $13 an hour in the heat of some of these places during a summer, knocking on doors, making sure everyone's prepped to who's our target population, is not going to cut it. Democrats were offering money that you could seriously live off of. Or at least in the case of the one outfit that we just spoke to a media about, you might as well not work at Lowe's. At least not for that time. Because this woman who was working at Lowe's could make more money in a week doing this for Democrats during the time period she had volunteered for that. And it's a PAC. Democratic donors understand and get their money, their checkbook out. Geolocated in Nevada, while one GOP canvasser claimed to be door knocking near Las Vegas, geolocation data revealed them to be at a casino 8 miles away. Here he is claiming to be knocking on a door. He's at Caesar's Palace. This report is based on interviews with more than 20 Republicans who have experience in canvassing operations, including operatives who have worked at the top levels of the RNC and overseen large-scale field operations, mid-level managers, and canvassers who travel the country picking up work. Most expressed concerns. NBC News also obtained and reviewed internal campaign data that appeared questionable, including geo-tracking information showing canvassers filing far from the homes they claim to have visited. Most Republicans who spoke with NBC News did so on the condition of anonymity out of fear of retribution or because they were not authorized to speak publicly. Oh, there's no doubt there's retribution. It is also true that if certain canvasser companies want to keep having work in the future, if, say, a candidate hires them, pays them $40,000 to knock on, let's say, 20,000 doors, and the Republican establishment does not want that candidate, in fact, has injected their own candidate. If that knocking company wants to keep putting food on their table in the future, and someone from, say, the NRSC or the leadership funds call up and say, we don't want you knocking on those doors, then they just might falsify knocking data and sabotage the candidate who entrusted them to get a job done. Because that happens too. Donors have been eager to open their wallets for this type of work. Not really. And campaign finance records show canvassing is a multi-million-dollar business. Yeah, not like Democrats. Just how effective those dollars are is questionable. The scripts suck. As somebody who writes polling questionnaires, designs polling questionnaires, writes the questions in the best possible way, best practices, I can tell you the scripts blow. The major canvasser companies do not know how to write a script. Democrats do, and they're pushy. Really pushy. Good, though. It's good. Especially if unions are helping out. They're even volunteers doing their union duty. It's really hard if you're a union member when you have 2, 3 union people on your doorstep pressuring you. It's really hard to say no, and they don't. Republicans are like, oh, thank you so much. Here's your door knocking literature. We look forward to your support. Peace out. When they're actually on the door. All right, because these numbers are recycled. Whoops, I went too far. Because these numbers are recycled, they're used in text messages, they're used in mailers, they're used to target voters, said one GOP field operative who has worked on a multiple party-aligned canvassing efforts. And if the base data is bad, oh my God, if the base data is bad, it's a disaster for campaigns everywhere. That's it. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. That's it. One national GOP operative who's overseeing door knocking campaigns estimated that in their experience, quote, when it comes down to the actual cheating, unquote, roughly, quote again, 10 to 20% of the staff ends up getting fired, close quote. I've seen campaigns when it was more than that. I've seen everybody but the core team members. There's always a leader who's supposed to be a supervisor overseeing the canvassing manager. They know what they're doing. They're a veteran knocker. They know what they're doing for a while. And then there's like their Craigslist team. I've seen entire operations whittled down to the core members. GOP leaders have blamed a variety of factors for disappointing midterm elections despite narrowly gaining control of the House of Representatives. Well, that, of course, was the underperformance of a lifetime. Literally. This is not the dominance of abortion in the wake of overturning Roe v. Wade, so-called flawed candidates. You telling me John Fetterman's not a flawed candidate? O'Day was supposed to be a perfect candidate for Colorado. Hated Donald Trump, right? Perfect for the state of Colorado, supposedly. O'Day got crushed. All right, so this, and of course, the ultimate scapegoat, the ultimate straw man, President Donald Trump. Think about in 2016 what it really means if the by the way, before at 2016, the Republican Party had basically nothing. Reince Priebus, and nice of a guy as he is, really ran the RNC into the ground. They had nothing. The individual groups, their data was even worse than it is now. They had nothing and they had no way to share or anything. So think about the turnout the man generated all by himself to win that election. Then fast forward to 2020, up against all the stuff with COVID, Republicans already dealing with these horrendous issues. Think about how many, I mean, folks, again, the highest number of votes for a sitting president ever, despite dealing with these problems. 40,000 votes in a few states, despite these problems. Even in 2018, which so many of the naysayers, the truth is, until Republicans botched this last election, Republican performance in 2018 in the U.S. Senate was the strongest performance since JFK for a first-term incumbent midterm party. Had Martha McSally held on in Arizona, you would have had to come back to FDR. All with these issues. So I really want to get into the poll in Florida, but we're going to talk more about this in the future. It's really worth pointing out. I'm actually going to send this article to all of you. Locals, I meant to share this with you guys. There it is. Rumble. There it is. And Getter. There it is. I don't think I missed anybody. Let me see what you're saying, Tito. YouTube pretext for 2020 was to claim it would cause violence. Did YouTube ever take action against a single false claim about 2016? Every time something happened to Tone, I would always say, okay, that's fine. You want to give us a strike? When is Hillary Clinton? And when are all these other YouTube is littered with videos about the fake Russia collusion hoax. It's littered with videos with fake claims that Donald Trump colluded with Vladimir Putin to steal the 2016 election. So if you're going to say that anyone who talks about 2020 is inciting violence, how could you not apply the same standard to 2016, considering the nutcase who shot Steve Scalise and 4 others was in fact motivated by the Russia collusion hoax, which of course the FBI, social media, and big media, corporate media do not want you to know. But before the FBI forced the Facebook to scrub his Facebook page, we screenshotted all of it and it was all over People's Pundit. This is the danger of a mass propaganda campaign the way they launched Russia collusion. That's the danger of intel agencies turning the dark arts on their own people. Those are meant to incite violence in other countries with regimes that the U.S. particularly doesn't like. So they're trying to cause violence and instability, political violence and instability, leading to what? Of course, regime credibility issues. That's the goal. And they turned it on their own citizens. Why would we expect a different result here? It's how human beings react to this stuff. So again, Hillary Clinton still to this day has stuff all over her Twitter feed that is patently false and more dangerous than any claim about 2020. Again, nobody was killed on January 6th, folks, as a result of the violence. Nobody. The officer was not killed. Brian Sitnick was not killed. He died of natural causes. That's all lies. Speaking of which, when we get into the Chuck Todd thing, it's like 3 minutes and 20 seconds of delusion. This is a network and a show that routinely, for years, pushed every facet of the Russia hoax, every new bombshell every week, and routinely gave people like James Comey and Peter Strzok a platform to defend their disgusting disgraces of selves. And that's what you're proud of, Chuck? However, I will say this. You should be proud that you're not letting your work, like so many other people do, and including myself, I battle with this all the time. Time moves by like that. You better try to spend as much time with your children as you can, because the other day I'm getting one of mine ready for school and I'm watching her get on the bus. And it's one of her last days of elementary school. And I flash back to the very first day I brought her to pre-K. And it's like, how the hell did this happen? She's going into middle school next year. How did this happen? Time goes fast and you have to appreciate it. All right. Let's take a real quick look at the map before we go over the crosstabs. All right. But yeah, when you guys have spare time, go through that, read that. The problems that Republicans have is really, really, really bad. The layers are deep, and it's going to take a very long time to fix it. And, or it doesn't have to. It's just the current state of things right now. It will. And unfortunately, they're going to blow at least $500 million trying to defeat a historically strong front runner in an election they're banking on the feds to help them with, when all of that really could just go towards fixing these problems. But that's the story of the Trump era, and Republicans shooting themselves in the foot, snatching defeat from the hands of victory. They're just too dumb to play this game. I don't know what else to say. They're too dumb, they're too scared, and they're too corrupt. And that has always been the problem Republicans have had. They're a mixture of those three. They're like 33.3% stupid, 33.3% corrupt, and 33.3% scared. And when you bake that in the oven, you have a loser. Let's take a look at the results of Florida. All right, so this will be updated. I don't suspect it's going to change a whole lot. I will say this. I can give you some margins for how things were on Saturday, late Saturday, and then Sunday. Generally, it looked like a little bit tighter with white voters, but even more expanded with non-white voters. And actually, before, why am I making such a big deal of this? Because non-white voters are becoming a larger and larger share of the electorate in the state of Florida, not only in a general election, but in a Republican primary. 6-8 years ago, that just simply was not the case. And now, if I can actually show you real quick before we drill into some of these, and let me just show you this so nobody thinks like I just popped this up out of nowhere. When you look at Florida now, for instance, all right, so here's Florida. Let's run the count. All right, it's doing its count thing. Here's Florida, the voter files for Florida. We're going to run this count, blah, blah, blah. Let it do its thing. Let it update. I should have unchecked these so it would go quicker. Of course, we have inferred ethnicity for the most part because, you don't always know for sure. But if we're just talking about a Republican primary, because, of course, in Florida, primaries are closed, which is why Florida is one of the strongest states we've polled yet for Joe Biden, because the support that RFK has built up to this point is not really Democratic support. His opposition to vaccine companies and vaccines in general, plus his fairly early turn on the COVID regime, and then, of course, the anti-war stuff. Democrats have become very, very neoliberal, pro-war, even though some of their voters may not realize that yet. They have. So somebody like RFK is going to do better in open primary states where you can get some disaffected Democrats, add them with, obviously, independent and third-party voters that don't like Joe Biden because there's so many of them. And that is really the core of RFK's support. And in Florida, he's doing markedly worse than he is in national polling or other states where there are open primaries. And why is that? It's because Democrats are still, the progressives are still behind Joe Biden. So having it a closed primary has worked out for Joe Biden in that state. And we'll look at that in a second in the crosstabs. So there is, and by the way, that's why we gave you all parties because we did, of course, ask certain voters who wanted to participate in the primary but are ineligible, meaning they are independents or they're registered with the other party. They will have to change their registration to participate. You get a different ballot in Florida depending on your party for a primary. So if they do, then RFK would do a little bit better. By the way, the same ditto is true of Ron DeSantis. One of the things that's really hurting Ron DeSantis in Florida right now is that only Republicans obviously can participate, and Trump support is like Biden's in the sense that his party base, the core of the party, is more pro-Trump than the independents and the moderates. in an open primary state, we're only talking about normally around 25 to 35% being independent or moderate. And in a closed primary state, it's not at all. So you have a bigger problem. Unless you start to win that core over. And Trump wins the conservative, self-identified conservative Republican. Trump wins. He's even doing well among moderate Republicans in Florida. It's just that DeSantis does better. That's closer. And then Trump is actually winning the liberal Republican in Florida, which we've seen in several states. But let's look this up. I'm only picking Republicans, okay? Even if their previous party, they had just switched from something else, we only want them. And we're going to run the count again before we run this little analysis report. And I'm just doing this to show you that we are, in fact, our sample is more white than it could be. In the end, we're only about 10% non-white in our sample for the Republican primary. It could be more. Hispanics last election were about 21% of the electorate. Right? In 2022, about 20%. In 2020, about 17, 18. So overall, where are they going? Well, that depends who the top of the ticket is, but they are moving much more right over time. And actually, let's throw in preferred ideology so we can look at that too, because I'll show you I actually think we're a little too moderate, but that's all right. I'd rather be cautious than overly bullish. All right, so it grabbed up a little over 5 million Republicans. It's a little bit more male than it is female. One thing to note, DeSantis does do better in our poll among female Republican voters in Florida than male. He's losing men by a very significant margin, but he's only down among females by about 3 points. That's a big difference from other states, and nationally, Trump's lead has been fueled by female voters. All right, so men are going for Trump 58.3 to 23.9 for DeSantis. All right, and really everybody else is mired in very low single digits. Females, 45.9 for Trump to 42.7 for DeSantis. That is very different, again, than other states and nationals that we've done. All right, so that's a little bit more male than female. Here, even in a Republican electorate or even in Republican registrations, only about 3.4% are unknown. That is noteworthy because most unknowns in this unknown block, it tends to skew more non-white. All right, so it's 14% Hispanic, roughly. And only about 2% Asian, and that means we're a little bit too Asian, but that's all right. And African American is about 1.5%, rounded up, 2%, right? The unknown tends to be more non-white, so maybe African American is just like 1.8 or 2.1. Maybe Asian is like 2.4 instead. It's rare. There are, of course, going to be some white, not Hispanic, in unknown. But for the most part, it's just the way it is. For some reason, and I have some good ideas about why that is, but those that are classified as unknown tend to be more non-white than white. Without a doubt, there's whites in that sample block. But we have whites about 85% in the Republican primary right now, and that's a pretty good bet. We have Hispanics about 10%, and that may be an understatement a little bit, but it's a pretty good bet. And then Asians and African Americans make up the last 5. Or Asian other and African Americans make up the last 5. As you can see, Florida is not a very, especially overall post-grads could be like 14%. 16 tops, 17 tops. But that's very, very rarely the case in a presidential election cycle where more working class people vote. All right. You can see completed college is only 24. It's usually about a total of 35 in exit polling when I'm talking about the sum of advanced degrees and 4-year degrees. About 35%. That's it. Those who did not complete college are about 65% of the electorate in a general electorate in the state of Florida. And you can see here with the Republicans, it looks like it's actually even a little bit less. So maybe 20% of a 4-year, 5 of a post-grad, et cetera, et cetera. Now there's a huge unknown because college, it's not a requirement. So obviously it's going to be more, but it's not a requirement to have that on your voter record. So we have other attributes that infer whether you are educated or not. Completed high school is going to be obviously a lot more than that. The some college associate degree block is the biggest block in Florida in a general electorate. So if you've had some college or you have a 2-year associate degree, those two combined are the biggest voting block in the state of Florida. All right. So with that all in mind, let's go back to the map and then we'll go to the crosstabs because I want to point out what's going on here. A lot of people were really kind of stunned at some of these regional numbers, but I'm not, and I think we can explain it. So if we're looking by region, let me get my crosstabs just to go along with this, and then I'm going to put up the crosstabs in a bit, but let's go by region. All right, so in the Panhandle, let's start there, all right, which we call the Panhandle and the North. The Panhandle being 8% of that overall, and the North being about 10. So together, we're looking at 18 to 20%. All right. Right now, Donald Trump is ahead, but DeSantis is really close. 46.8 to 37.9. Why? Because DeSantis does the best. This is the North. In Gadsden and Leon, it shouldn't surprise anybody. It's the capital. All right. So if we zoom in a little bit, DeSantis's support is centered. He's got some in the Panhandle, of course, but his support is centered mostly in the Tallahassee area. Whereas with Trump, and these are iterations of 6. So just to explain what that means, if we zoom out again, you can see that DeSantis has got +4, right? Meaning you can see the other blue dot, but that there are others in a general close vicinity. And together, if it's under 6, it will be clustered together. If it's in that rough general, when you start to see big numbers like +20, it means it's a very, very concentrated area of support. But that does not mean the margin. It doesn't mean DeSantis ahead by 4 in the Tallahassee region. He's actually ahead by a lot more than that. But that combined with some of the support he has other in the Panhandle, you see who it is: a female, 53, white, some college or an associate degree making under 30,000, another religion other than the one stated, has children, but they're all over 18 and is divorced and disabled. She's a suburban voter. Another one, a female, 38, white, has a post-grad degree, makes between 50 and 100, is working full-time, is married, has 1 or more school-age children under 18, military, no, Protestant, she's a Protestant, and in suburbia. So generally when we look from Liberty County west to Escambia, Trump is up. You got to get past this Tallahassee area. And most of, if not the vast majority of his support, is in one of the biggest Republican counties in the Panhandle. That's Bay County, where Panama City is. And you can see Donald Trump's doing very well there. All right. Let's take a look at some of his numbers here. I guess I'm going to have to zoom really far in. They're like right on top of each other. That's what's going on. So one of the two is a male, 67, white, some college or an associate degree, $50,000 to $100,000 a year, is retired, married. All the kids are old, above 18, moved out, veteran of the military, and is another religion of some sort and is in rural areas. But actually, it's why I'm a little bit wondering why it's doing some of those. I'm going to lower the iterations so we can see more clusters. All right. Here's another one, male, 56, high school or GED, under 30,000, working full time, is not married, has no kids, is not a military vet, is another religion other than the ones mentioned, lives in the suburb. That is a typical one of the very typical Trump voters. And the other one over here, right by Escambia, but not quite there yet. He is a military veteran. Trump does very well with veterans. He is winning active duty military, but not as well as he's winning veterans. Protestant, other, has all kids are over the age of 18, divorced, working full-time, making 30 to 50 a year, has some college or an associate degree, and again is white. Let's zoom out. Oh, I did want to get one of DeSantis's voters because it's interesting. Hold on. All right, so here's another male, 67, white, Caucasian, some college or associate degree, 30 to 50 years old, is married, all the kids are older, grown up, out of the house, is not a veteran or a member of the military, is Catholic and in a suburb. All right, this is one for Tim Scott, little older guy, post-grad, very much Tim Scott's kind of voter. All right, let's go out a little bit. So overall, in the North Florida Panhandle region, it is close. With Trump having a slight edge, a 10-point edge. Sample sizes are not that small for that area, so pretty confident in it. The Panhandle, in our polling in 2020, we've never missed Florida, never. The poll, it was really rather interesting because we didn't give good definitions of what is the Panhandle, what is the North. Okay, and I think I did that on Friday, didn't I? I think so. I think so. I could do it again. I can pull it up real quick. Oops, that is the actual survey. Oops. Don't you dare. It would block me anyway. It doesn't matter. And by the way, people who get a hold of these links, you can't forward it to your friend. You can, if you want to have an exercise in futility, knock yourself out. But they all have unique IDs attached to them. We know who we're trying to reach. All right. So, I mean, you could send it to your friend afterwards. It's going to come back with a blank ID. And if it does, you're thrown in the garbage. So, I mean, Robert Haley tried to explain to people to people in the last election. It's worthless. The Panhandle is Escambia, Appaloosa, Santa Rosa, Walton, Bay, Calhoun, Franklin, Gadsden, Gulf, Holmes, Jackson, Jefferson, Leon, Liberty, Madison, Taylor, Wakulla, Washington. So Gadsden and Leon, a lot of votes there. DeSantis doing very well there. In areas like Bay, Liberty, Escambia, Bay has being one of the biggest net vote gains for Republicans in a general election and in a primary. I mean, Trump had this support in the very much looked the way it does now. And Rubio did well in Leon and Gadsden, and then also did well in parts of South Florida. That's different this time. If you're looking at the map, you can see Trump is he's wrecking it in Florida. Look at it, and that's his strength comes actually from non-white voters in the South. And that's actually what keeps him doing so well among post-grad voters, even though he's losing four-year college grads to Ron DeSantis by 3. All right, so you can generally see where everybody, the Tampa area, they'll give you the, Orlando is the closest region. Trump, 43.2 to 42.8. And you can see why. Is the Orlando and Kissimmee, Trump actually does better in, but in the suburbs around it, because Trump does better in the urban areas, but in the suburbs around these urban areas, you can see where DeSantis has strength, okay? Look, suburban. But then with Trump, there's some obviously suburban there, but if you drill down in there, you'll see a lot is urban, right? So this is a battlefield right now. It really is. In the Tampa area, Hillsborough, Pasco, and Pinellas, which is the Tampa Bay area. Oh, Orlando is Brevard, Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Indian River, Martin, Okeechobee, Palm Beach, and St. Lucie. And that's because it's Orlando Atlantic Coast. The Tampa Bay area is Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough, which you can see here. And you can obviously see that Trump has a lead here, and it's due to, again, it's because he's ahead so much with Hispanics, and he has a working class white base. That is what's giving him Hillsborough and Pasco and Pinellas both. But it is, he's above 50 in the Tampa Bay area, 54.3 to 29.7. But that is not his strongest area. The Gulf Coast and mid-Florida is a little bit stronger for Trump, 56.5 to 29.5. And that is, just to give you, Charlotte, Collier, DeSoto, Glades, Andre, Lee, Sarasota, Monroe, Hardy, Highlands, Manatee, and Polk. Even though DeSantis does really good in Monroe and places like Fort Myers, he does really well there. And even in parts by Sarasota, you can see just south there of Sarasota, right? He's doing really well. There's a couple for Vivek in this area as well. But this is just south here. The Tampa Bay area is literally just 3 counties, all right, where everything else is southwest and mid-Florida. And that's from all the way down from Monroe over here, right? Monroe is right here, all the way up. A lot of Republican votes here. But you do see DeSantis doing good in parts of we're in and around Fort Myers. Cape Coral's more for Trump, and you can see that. A little older Protestant, or younger Protestant, but DeSantis does better with some older voters. 83 Catholic, some college associate, has a high income. This one is a veteran, right? But even though Trump wins veterans, this is obviously indicative of the minority share that DeSantis has. Another one over here, this one's a Protestant, but again, older. And Trump does, he's doing all right with older voters, but if it was Florida and I would want to keep my lead, I'd want to shore up some of that older vote. It's just that younger vote, he's just killing it. And if you go and look at the exit polls in 2020, even though the gubernatorial election was a blowout, you can see that it's done on the back of seniors and super seniors. DeSantis did not do well between voters that are 18 to 39. They were just, it's a midterm, and there were a lot less of them. Donald Trump during 2022, when there was 2 million more votes in the electorate or more, that you can actually see that those younger voters Trump does well with are part of his base now. So he doesn't get killed with the 18 to 24 crowd. 25 to 29 is Democrats' best group, but everything above 30, Trump starts to win. The 30 to 39, he takes. The 40 to 49, he takes. It's just that it's closer with seniors and super seniors at the presidential level, and that's why the race was, it was almost 4 points, but it's not 18 points like DeSantis won the governor's race. But again, there was a lot more 50 to 64-year-olds, and DeSantis won them by a bigger margin. It wasn't a presidential turnout. You didn't see young people. So if you didn't duplicate that kind of strength, you're not going to get it. Again, 78%. These veterans in like Collier County, veterans in, and that's, really the only, Lee, Collier, if you're a veteran, you have a high likelihood of supporting Trump. If you're not, then you could very well be a DeSantis voter. All right, so that's the Gulf Coast and mid-Florida. Not that I think any is, more interesting or anything like that. It's just that I think the story here is that I told you that Miami-Dade was going to be very close in 2020. People thought it was a joke. They didn't understand where it was coming from, and they thought it was basically going to be made a fool of. I was right, and Donald Trump got as close to carrying Miami-Dade as George W. Bush in his re-election win in 2004. It was a lot whiter in Miami-Dade in 2004 than it was in 2020. And I said, no matter who is the nominee in 2024, Miami-Dade is probably going to go, meaning going to Republicans. In the gubernatorial election, it did go. I listen, it's significant, but it's not as significant as it doesn't mean it automatically will go to any Republican or DeSantis in 2024. That's just not true. Bob McDonnell carried Fairfax in 2009. It didn't mean that Mitt Romney, or even if Bob McDonnell was the nominee, would have carried Fairfax County and Loudoun County. He would not have. He would have lost them. So it's significant here who has the support of the voters that are really driving this change to the right in southeastern Florida and in the Gold Coast, all the way up to the Palm Coast, by the way, which you can see. And if you look by, first of all, by region, Trump leads DeSantis 60.4 to 25.3. It's a big difference then from when he faced Marco Rubio in 2015. All right. Big difference. Rubio did really well in that area. Then he did well in places like Duval and to DeSoto, so it was like these little blocks of places Rubio did well. And Trump did not do that great, all right, in the Southeast, in the Gold Coast. And that's changed now. This is a base of support for Trump. There are a lot of votes. So it's going to be very difficult if Trump carries, from Liberty to Escambia and crushes it in Bay County where there are a lot of votes. It's going to be very difficult to hold him back, even if DeSantis wins. Gadsden Land right now is not winning Duval, but you can see he has a lot of support there in and around the Jacksonville area. Trump is actually winning. But down through the Palm Coast, and DeSantis has some pretty good support in Daytona Beach. But from Flagler to the Palm Coast, then it's DeSantis in Daytona. Get past Daytona and you get closer to the Gold Coast, and the Space Coast, it starts to just get to be Trump all the way down the coastline. And there are pockets like in Broward, there are some pockets for DeSantis without a doubt. I mean, he's not without support there. It's just that once you get, it's dominant, folks. And there are a ton of votes here. Once you get and drill down into this, watch this. All right, Hispanic, white. Let's drill down further so you can see, because it really just gets Hispanic, white. That one was Hispanic from before, right? White, and it's +5 more over here in clusters. These are obviously, what do you think? Venezuelan, Cuban enclaves. And look, Vivek over here grabbing some support. I'm not at all surprised. Actually, I think Vivek's played a good game. It's just that he's got some structural fundamental challenges. I don't know how you beat that. I just don't. Because he's not being forsaken by like Collier and Lee, which have a lot of Republican votes. He's winning Panama City. There's a lot of votes there. So when we look at by race, which we're going to do right now, and again, we made we didn't make Hispanics in our poll are about 10%. It could be more because they have moved to the right so much. And when we look by race, you can see Trump's only winning the white vote 51 to 35. It's not very dominant. I mean, is he winning it? Yeah, he's winning it. But there's room there for DeSantis to grow. Where there's not any room is among non-whites, other than Asians. But Asians are 2%. Hispanics are at least going to be 5 times, if not more like 8 times the share. So we have it again around 10% of the electorate. Trump is winning at 62.8 to 24.5. Let me add, hold on one second. I don't know why it's not in there. Probably because I was waiting for the update to make it a larger sample. But if we look at even some smaller sample sizes, give me 1 second. Bear with me. I'm going to add Hispanic detail into it. All right. Give me 1 second. Opening it up. Survey demographics. Where are you by race? Hispanic specific. Nope. Hispanic detail. Hispanic specific is every single one. But because there just isn't that much for certain groups, for certain demographic groups, then I didn't put them all in there. All right. There we go. So let me save it. Here we go. Let me refresh this puppy. All right. Let's look by Hispanic detail. You can see the very bulk of Hispanic voters in a Republican primary are Cuban and Puerto Rican. Okay. Puerto Rican in a general election is more liberal. Trump barely lost. He lost them. He did better among them in 2020 than other presidents, including himself, have done in the past, but he did lose them. In the gubernatorial election, they were very tight. I think actually DeSantis carried them, and they overwhelmingly skewed older, and that's why. But in a general election, I still think DeSantis could carry him, but it would be a different ballgame. Right now, the base. Why? Because of the I would not vote in the general election, a lot of it, most of it, not most of it, but there are many, many, many more. The percentage of Hispanics who say, I would vote for Donald Trump, but if it's not Donald Trump, I'm not going to vote, is way higher as they're of their own share proportionately than white voters who say it. Even though there's like 3 times as many white voters who say, if Donald Trump's not the nominee, I'm not going to vote. DeSantis' voters say, if DeSantis isn't the nominee, many of them say, I will vote for Joe Biden. And by the way, that is backed up by Rasmussen, what we told you a week and a half ago with the national poll. We had 21% or so of DeSantis' voters say that they would vote for Joe Biden. Rasmussen just found 40. I think that may be a little bit high, but it's still showing what we are showing, which is he doesn't have a DeSantis or I won't vote, a DeSantis or bust vote, if you will, like Trump does. He has a DeSantis or Biden vote, which for those who, again, calling Trump voters cults, I would rather, if you're partisan, believe me when I tell you, you'd much rather somebody's disgruntled voter not vote than vote for your enemies, your political enemies. So, I mean, the cultist thing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. All right. So anyway, Cubans, Trump is carrying 70 to 20. Puerto Ricans, 63 to 37. Colombians, 78 to 22. And again, we did talk to more of them, but they're weighted down. So that's why sometimes you'll see like 100, but not actually see a response. It's because weighting down takes some of them out. And even though it's a 0 response, it'll show you that somebody's got like 100% support. It's because weighted down, they're not quite equivalent to a single interview, but that interview was conducted. I know it's crazy. I know it's stupid. And then other is 51. We get too small here when we're talking about this. And Trump is ahead with Venezuelans, but these are such a small thing. I should have done Cuban, Puerto Rican, and then lumped everyone else together. It's just that I thought it would be interesting to see Venezuelans. In fact, I am actually a little bit curious. So let me go back to the regroup variable, and I'm going to change the name of it. Hold on. I'm not going to change the name of it. I'm going to change the regroup. Here's Hispanic detail. So instead of it being Cuban, Puerto Rican, Colombian, Mexican, and other, I'm going to delete Colombian. I'm going to delete Mexican and delete Venezuelan. And then I'm going to add them to the other category to see what the overall sample is and what the margin is for it. Let's see if it doesn't screw anything up. Let's update it. Okay, proceed. All right, so it deleted the old variable. Let me just make sure it didn't mess with the weighting variable. It did not. All right, let's update it. Let's go back to Hispanic detail. And you can still see Cubans there, 70.3 to 20.2. Puerto Ricans, 62.8 to 37.2. Nothing changed. And then other is 50.8 to 22.4, even though it actually together is now a larger sample than the Puerto Rican sample, which is, again, small. And by the way, Florida politics, I don't remember the reporter's name, but you covered that poll really, really well. All right? You covered this poll really well. His name is A.G. Gankarski. If I'm butchering your name, I'm sorry about that, Mr. Gankarski. But he says in here, I love this. Though the sample sizes are small, DeSantis also leads with those who are widowed and separated, while married, single, and divorced people prefer Trump. That is the correct way to report a poll. When a sample size is small, it is important to know the sample size is small, which means sampling errors for subgroups are higher, right? So you really have to take some of it with a grain. Now, obviously, these taken together in concert, it's significant. So it is what it is. So there we have it in Florida. Let's go back to the map. Stop sharing. Let's go back to the map and look at it one more time overall to get a grip on everything that's going on here. And I understand he's right. By the way, in that article, polling in Florida has been all over the place. I am highly, highly, highly confident in my ability to poll the state of Florida. In 2014, I was the only one who was right. In 2016, I think Ann Seltzer got it right, but she didn't get it as close. In 2018, I was one of only two pollsters to predict that DeSantis would win regardless. And in 2020, I took Florida off the table in September when we found Trump +3, and I said, that's a wrap. Or Trump +2.6 or something. And that was a wrap. And then, of course, in 2022, we saw DeSantis's approval rating and said this would not even be competitive, and it was a waste of money to poll. It was not going to be competitive. And I'm not talking about +10s. It was a blowout. By the way, in general election matchups, which you're going to go over later this week, they are a blowout. Trump has a little stronger support than DeSantis, but both of them would carry the state of Florida pretty easily. Now, why is Trump's a little bit stronger? Because there are people who say they will not vote if Donald Trump is not the nominee. The electorate would be on the Republican side a little bit smaller, or at least Republican leaning votes. Even though DeSantis does better with moderates and independents, Trump would gin up the base turnout so much and then have some of these low propensity, especially Hispanics in the Gold Coast, low propensity voters that would come out. There are a ton of votes there. And of course, it is a statewide race. But we're seeing huge numbers of Hispanics saying, I'll vote for Donald Trump, but I will not vote at all. And when the electorate could be 22% Hispanic, that has a major impact across the board. And we're talking about double-digit leads over Joe Biden. Joe Biden is never won the state, so maybe we shouldn't be too surprised. But again, he only lost it by just about 4 points, a little under 4 points last time. This would be a 10-point loss. 10 to 13 point, maybe 14-point loss. Florida, for those who have asked me several times, could Florida vote to the right of Texas? I am now a believer that at the end of the day, yes, it's possible. It does depend who the nominee is, because I think, we'll have to see what happens with Texas. But it does depend who the nominee is. But without a doubt, this is not a race I'm used to seeing in Florida. All these years polling the state of Florida for a presidential election, even most of the gubernatorial elections. It was always razor thin. In 2020, I could see it widening out. I could see Trump had a lead. It was a solid lead, even though maybe 3 points sounded close. There were so many undecideds that I knew were going to break to Trump anyway. So it just it really wasn't a close race. It wasn't. And so we took it off the table. But that's not even that anymore. What we're seeing now is not even that. And I'll show you him versus Biden, a map just like this one, and then a DeSantis versus Biden map. DeSantis does better in Duval and around the Jacksonville area, and he certainly does better around Tallahassee area than Trump. But he does worse in the Gold Coast all the way up to the Palm Coast. And Tampa's pretty close. Whereas with Trump, it looks like he's taking, he's of course going to take Pasco. Pinellas is always the question mark. Hillsborough is not really a bellwether anymore, though it used to be. In a presidential cycle that gets away from Republicans now, Trump lost Pinellas by, I think, like 200 or 400 votes last time, even though he won it overwhelmingly. That's not this race anymore. Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough are gone. They're going to Trump. His support with Hispanics. The Puerto Rican element is the linchpin in Hillsborough. It's not Cuban. It's not Venezuelan. It's Puerto Rican. It's Mexican. And they tended to hold their liberal lean longer than other Hispanics in Florida. That is looking like it's no longer going to happen. And so for both DeSantis and Trump, it's blowouts. So Florida's not, at this point in my mind, for 24, Florida's not competitive. It's just not. It's not. All right, so let's take a real quick break. And when we come back, what do we at? 113. Laura's telling me I got to stop around like 155 to make sure, or 150 to make sure. So I want to do that so I don't screw over Jack. All right. Yeah, so let's take a real quick break. When we come back, I'll try to grab this Chuck Todd. I'll try to grab this Chuck Todd clip and see what, I just want to play it. I just want to play it. All right. Listen, folks. Authorities fear extremists are targeting the U.S. power grid, and that's according to Time magazine, not us. If just 9 key substations were to go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. Your life, my life, would be frozen in time at the moment the power went out. That's why we all need a solar generator. The new Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your refrigerator. Now, right now, you can go to 4patriots.com and get one for 10% off if you use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. The code is for your first purchase only, but that's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 on something big to save yourself as much money as you can to get your Patriot Power Generator today. And even though I have a natural gas generator myself, I still recognize the need for the solar. By the way, you see that solar water thing? It's awesome. I got it. It's actually right behind me. You can see it in the thing. It works. It absolutely works. All right, before we go back to our regular scheduled program, let's tell you about this deal that our friends at Jam and Bean have. Patriot owned, but also these guys happen to be some of the best roasters of coffee on planet Earth. It's delicious. It's amazing. And if you go to Jam and Bean right now, JAMNbean.com, and use the promo code TPP40 at checkout on any new subscription, you will get 40% off, plus you will still get 10% off every subsequent renewal going forward. Again, jamandbean.com, whether you like K-Pods, you like freshly roasted coffee that you ground yourself, doesn't matter. On any new subscription, use the promo code TPP40 and you'll get 40% off initially right up front right there, and you'll still get 10% off every month when you re-up that subscription. jamandbean.com. And of course, send us your feedback. We love getting feedback, not only from Jam and Bean, but for Patriots, everything. But the Jam and Bean feedback is fun because it's delicious. It's good. And the popcorn, every single one of them is great. And by the way, from what you guys get, it's like get something maybe you haven't heard me try yet, and then let me know what you think. but it's everything I've tried. It's just so delicious. All right. Before we go on to Chuck Todd, I don't want this to get thrown by the wayside again, because the debt deal was, taking everybody's attention. Nobody was paying attention to the labor productivity and cost report that came out last week. All right. Revisions were significant. And hold on, let me get a little sip of water. Non-farm business. Previous quarter a year ago. Look at the initial reports and look at the revisions. Labor productivity fell 2.1%, non-farm businesses. Output 0.5. The headline here is that labor productivity collapsed and unit costs have risen. If you look at manufacturing specifically, which the administration touted when this came out, you will see that really from the previous quarter, hourly compensation fell 3.1. From a year ago, it fell 2.8, while unit costs from the previous quarter rose 3.1, and from a year ago, 4.5%. Output declined from the previous quarter. Labor productivity was down 2.5% from the previous quarter. Look at durable manufacturing. Durable goods are products that last 3 years or more. Airplanes, certain appliances, manufactured goods that last 3 years or more, or so intended to. Labor productivity from the previous quarter, 5.6% decline. Hourly compensation, almost a 5% decline. But labor costs still rose almost 5%. Hourly compensation down 1.2. Even though hours worked are up 2.5. Output down 3.2%. Over the year, real hourly compensation fell 3.4% as unit labor costs rose 4.3%. Labor productivity from a year ago is down 2. Non-durable manufacturing, the story is a little bit better, but not great. Across the board, labor productivity declined. Output, in several key areas declined, while unit labor costs everywhere rose. Look at the revisions. This is a load. This is some crap, man. This is some crap. Really is. Manufacturing was only supposed to have declined productivity 1.3. It really declined 2.5. Output was supposed to have risen 0.5. It really declined by 1. Real hourly compensation was only supposed to be down 1.6. It was down almost double that. It's just, again, these revisions are really eyebrow raising. Real hourly compensation in durable goods sector, was looking bad already. 3.1 decline. Really? Almost 5%. Hourly compensation, they said, rose by 0.6 of a percentage point. No, it didn't. It declined by twice as much. Hours worked was slightly less. Output was almost 3 times. It declined almost twice as much as previously reported. And labor productivity fell 5.6, not 4.4. This is a really, really, really bad report. It's not good, folks. Not good. And I'm stunned that we're in the middle of this economic, it is an economic package. Fiscal and monetary policy are going to be both now. If we hit some kind of a crisis, which I believe is frankly inevitable, we're reducing the number of moves we're going to be able to make. You know how rare it is for Congress to undo a piece of fiscal legislation? It's just bad across the board. It's just terrible. Read it when you get a chance. It's just absolutely horrible. Let me actually send it to you guys here. YouTube, this is the HTML version. You guys can get the PDF version if you want. I was first under the PDF version. There you go, locals. There you go, Rumble. And last but not least, Gatter. Just pathetic. Share. All right. Let me see if I can't get this Chuck Todd thing. Let's have fun with the last couple of minutes, the last half an hour or so. Let's have fun with the last half an hour or so. Is there like a herd of elephants running around or something? That's what my dad. Oh my God. I'm turning into my father. My grandfather. There's a herd of elephants up there. What's the banging? I know. And listen, I see like 3 different people. Why do we vote? Why do we vote? JD Vance, I think, really did put it best. If Republican leadership would have just went to them and with the voters and said, listen, it's divided government. We have a very tiny minority. This is the best we could do for divided government. Maybe voters would have dealt with it better. But instead, they tried to piss on your head and tell you it was raining. As I think it was Bonnie said last week, somebody said. And people don't like that stuff. All the intensity, even though you'll see these polls where people are like, I slightly support it. I think Rasmussen was way off compared to NBC News, which surprised me. NBC News was definitively against the bill. People showed people were against the bill. I think the brinksmanship way of doing politics is starting to lose some of its power. Where you just like scare people. The checks aren't coming. The VA checks aren't coming. Social Security's not coming. Out of here. Democrats are brutal, man. When they get into a debt ceiling fight, I remember when Barack Obama was president, he started closing down national parks and everything. He was making the decision not to pay old people. That was a decision. You can't visit that today. We're closing down White House tours. They are vicious. And I think the bottom line for some Republican voters, just from what I hear all the time, is that if Democrats had a 2-seat majority, if they had a half a seat majority, if they had a 4-seat majority, they had a tiny, tiny majority, they would bring everything to a grinding halt until they got their way. And they're just tired of Republicans not being willing to do the same. And at some point, you're going to depress your vote. You're going to depress your vote. The biggest depression of it all, the act that could depress the vote more than anything, is actually why we are seeing some people get into this race this week for president. Some people are running for cabinet positions. Some people are running for vice president. Some people are running to sell books. And then there are others, including, I would say, the top 3 non-Trump names that actively have been not only counting on, but rooting for lawfare to take him out of this race. And then have some excuse as to how they could be removed from the ballot or be ineligible or whatever it may be. And I'm telling you, something like that happens, you're going to see millions of voters writing in Donald Trump's name. It's going to be a 1992 style loss for Republicans. At least as of today, it would be. I'm telling you, or David. Right. Because they really, listen, you just have to listen to the audio and you'll understand where some of this thinking came from. But there were a lot of people who supported McCarthy who said if this debt ceiling thing was not attached to some effort to secure the border, then that's a deal breaker for me. And I'm pulling my support from McCarthy, and I'm pulling, I'm pulling all the strings I can to get voters to pull the trigger on the mechanism to have him removed, the speaker. And I'm telling you, they're not doing it. So these people were telling you these things in bad faith. They were not telling the truth. Not telling the truth. And that's exactly right, Jonathan. They had a tiny majority. And they ran, They ran it. And they didn't seem to care. They lost 15 seats in 2020. And they still kept governing like they had a historic majority or something. And I think, and the bottom line is that's what Republicans expect from their leaders. All right. Let's see. Can I get this clip? Yeah. So Mike Davis, our buddy Mike Davis, the founder of the Article 3 Project and frequent guest on Inside the Numbers, instead in response to Chuck Todd announcing he is leaving Meet the Press, good riddance. Chuck Todd turned what was once one of the best news shows into an unwatchable political screed. Oh, I will tell you this, folks. I remember when I was young, not even relatively recently, meaning like 10 years maybe recently, I loved Meet the Press. When I was young with Tim Russert, I loved Meet the Press. I got that message, Laura. I'm so proud of her. And I'm proud of both my children. But I just got news about one. I'm like the luckiest, and I'm sure every dad who has a daughter feels this way, but I am the luckiest father. I have a daughter who's this like mirror image of me, only as a female and much, much prettier. And she's a brilliant girl who works her butt off, and she deserves it. She's getting some, I don't know what we're going to do, Laura, but she's getting some kind of, I mean, we expect that of her. So I don't know how, there's a fine line between, rewarding, but she's just been on a roll lately and she deserves it. So put your mind to it and let's see what she deserves something for it. I don't know what that's going to be, but we'll talk about it. I'm so proud of her and I'm glad you sent that to me, even though I'm in the middle of a show. I've been wondering and never doubted her for a moment. All right, listen, Chuck Todd for 3 minutes and 32 seconds, Thank you, Blackfish. Thank you. I like to think that myself. Laura is a wonderful mother, and there are some things you, as a father, cannot do with a daughter. You have to leave that up to the mother, and Laura's done a great job doing that. And you, as a dad, you got to try to be an example because, I mean, let's face it. If you're a piece of crap to your wife and your daughter's watching, then when she gets older, she's going to think it's all right for a man to be a piece of crap to her. All kids watch your work ethic. And while we're going to bring this up with Chuck Todd right now, I, of course, want more time with my children and my family. But, I know they look at their dad and all the work he puts in and it's having a positive influence, All right, I'm going to stop old Chucky here and there when I hear something. Instead of just taking it all at once, we're going to go through it and comment on it as we hear Chucky make this delusional, what was it, 3 minutes and something? 3 minute and 32 second, mostly delusion-ridden announcement that he is leaving Meet the Press. While you're doing this, don't forget that WikiLeaks exposed this guy as everything that we all suspected he was, taking DNC talking points from the media, from the communications people. Here's what we want you to say on Meet the Press today. Jake Tapper at CNN did the same thing. His producer constantly talking back and forth with Democrats and saying, we're going to have Donald Trump on today, or we're going to talk about Donald Trump today and Ted Cruz today. How do you want us to trip them up with foreign policy? It's all there in WikiLeaks. Chuck Todd making sure that the interns get tickets to the Democrat after party. Ugh. Ugh. So let's, as we watch this, God knows, as we watch this, I'm going to stop it here and there as we talk about it. Because Molly Hemingway's having a field day with this on Twitter. It has been since yesterday, but hasn't stopped today. Because one of the things that really sticks in her craw are these people who push the collusion hoax Every aspect, every element, every headline that ultimately collapsed, pretending that they're somehow better than the rest of us. And that they, as Chuck Todd will say, didn't fall for the propaganda. What a load of crap. All you have to do is go through Chuck Todd's emails. He's a total shill for the DNC. Always has been. Let's rock and roll.
Welcome back. I have a personal announcement. While today is not my final show, this is going to be my final summer here at Meet the Press. It's been an amazing, nearly decade-long run. I'm really proud of what this team and I have built over the last decade, and frankly, the last 15 plus years that I've been here at NBC, which also includes my time as political director. I've loved so much of this job, helping to explain America to Washington and explain Washington to America. When I took over Meet the Press, it was a Sunday show.
He explained America to Washington and Washington to America. He doesn't know the first thing about flyover country. During the 2016 election, he did a great job explaining America to DC. You're kidding me, right? Did Chuck Todd get in his car and sweep through the Mid-Atlantic and the Rust Belt to see all the towns hollowed out by NAFTA and soon to be completely destroyed by TPP? Which, by the way, most Republicans running for president right now supported, except for the former president, who did away with it in an executive order in one sweep, his first hour in office. Did he explain that to DC? Did he get in his car and drive to Appalachia to get a full firsthand look of the scourge of the opiate crisis had on America? Not just people in that area of the country, everybody, veterans like myself. You wanted an influx of recruits after 9/11 to go beat the war drums, right? They beat their war drums over fake WMDs. But they didn't know what to do with us. So they just stuffed us with pills. Damn near destroying most of our lives and destroying many of our lives. Thank God I didn't end up as one of them, though I easily could have. I was well on my way. I almost wrecked my life. Did he explain that to them? What a load of crap. I've been explaining America to DC. What America? The cubicles of New York City? The halls of Wall Street? K Street? Silicon Valley? The Bay Area? Did you go to Palestine, East Palestine, Ohio? Full of crap. You explained to the people at NBC why they should follow the lead of the DNC in every story they covered. That's what you explained.
Show that had a lot of people questioning whether it could still have a place in the modern media space. Well, I think we've answered that question and then some. We've taken Meet the Press from a single Sunday show to a distinct and important political franchise. From our daily show, Meet the Press Now, our magazine show, Meet the Press Reports, to our newsletters and podcasts, we've successfully expanded what makes Meet the Press special on Sundays to make it special no matter the topic or where it airs or when it airs. That includes our annual Meet the Press Film Festival as well, which has somehow become one of the most important festivals for Oscar buzz and nominations for news-driven documentaries.
Sounds like Americana to me. I didn't even know they had all that other stuff. Did you? And I do this for a living. Widespread circulation much? Film festivals? The Oscars? Yeah. Sounds like flyover country.
But the key to survival of any of these incredible media entities, including here at Meet the Press, is for leaders not to overstay their welcome. I'd rather leave a little bit too soon than stay a tad bit too long. I've had 2 amazing professional chapters, and I already have plans for my next chapter, including some projects right here at NBC News that I've been very focused on. Among them, docuseries and some docudramas focused on trying to educate the public better, bridge our divides, and pierce our political bubbles. So while I may be leaving this chair, I'm still going to help NBC navigate and coach colleagues in this 2024 campaign season and beyond.
Oh, thank God for that. Oh, thank God. What would NBC do without you?
But this is also an important time for me personally. I've let work consume me for nearly 30 years. I can't remember the last time I didn't wake up before 5 or 6 a.m.
This part I know.
And as I've watched too many friends and family let work consume them before it was too late, I promised my family I wouldn't do that. And just as important, and this is what really makes me happy, I'm also ready to take a step back because I have so much confidence in the person whom I'm going to pass the baton to. She's somebody who's been ready for this for a long time. Kristen, welcome. I've had the privilege of working with her from essentially her first day here in Washington. And let me just say, she's the right person in the right moment.
We'll see.
And for what it's worth, this is always how I hoped this would end for me, that I'd be passing the baton to her. And I'll officially do that in September. I'll be honest, though.
So you groomed your replacement, and obviously, I'm not sure that's a good comment in and of itself on what we can expect from her and Meet the Press, because obviously the direction he took Meet the Press was not one of even Tom Brokaw. He pretended at least to be somewhat impartial until Tickles ran, that was what's his name from Hardball, but he, in the Obama era, it just got really, really bad. But it certainly wasn't Garrett Utley or even Chris Wallace in the 80s, before Chris Wallace was a total stooge. But Chris, they were all followed by later Tim Russert, who for a long time, very obviously known to be liberal, but at least people respected him. He wasn't disingenuous. Although there is a very famous clip when there's a montage from the 2004 re-election, and Tim Russert obviously believed Al Gore was going to win the exit polls. It was one of the biggest exit poll disasters, next to 16. And you could see them over the period of the night, just it dawned on them that, in fact, Democrats were going to lose that election. And he became, he let his show. It was not one of his finer moments. But for the most part, I enjoyed Meet the Press with Tim Russert. Myself, I did, still.
I leave feeling concerned about this moment in history, but reassured by the standards we've set here. We didn't tolerate propagandists, and this network and program never will.
Whoa! NBC and MSNBC are some of the biggest pushers of the Russia collusion hoax. They pushed everything. George Floyd, you have got to be kidding me. Michael Brown. They never met a hoax they didn't want to push. They celebrated one thing during the Trump administration, and that was the ordering of Tomahawk missiles at certain targets in Syria after a chemical weapons attack a whistleblower said was bogus.
But it doesn't mean sticking your head in the sand either. If you ignore reality, you'll miss the biggest story. Being a real political journalist isn't about building a brand. It's about reporting what's happening and explaining why it's happening and letting the public absorb the facts. If you do this job seeking popularity, you are doing this job incorrectly. I take the attacks from partisans as compliments, and I take the compliments from partisans with a grain of salt.
Yeah, sure.
The goal of this and every Meet the Press
What you did was, it's in black and white. What you did was take direction from partisans. It's in black and white. Your emails were dumped. Nobody ever questioned the veracity of those emails. You routinely took direction from Democrats. They literally wrote the content sometimes for segments of Meet the Press while you were the head of Meet the Press.
Episode is to do all of the following
What
in
a
one
joke.
informative hour. Make you mad, make you think, shake your head in disapproval, and nod your head in approval. If you do all of that in 1 hour of this show, we've done our job. So again, this isn't goodbye, but know this: no matter who sits in this chair, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
So what do you guys think? What do you guys think? Everybody's laughing hysterically in the chats. He lives in a dreamland. Up Chuck Todd. I think that was what the late Rush Limbaugh used to call him. TW says this is an Orwellian nightmare. I mean, it's literally, it's another world. It's delusional. I don't know what else to say. If you really think that that's true, what If you're Chuck Todd and you really think what you just said is reality, then I think you need to have your head examined. You cannot sit there with a straight face and say that you resisted propaganda. You rejected propaganda. You are propaganda. Does anybody believe this? Or let me put it this way. Does anyone not fueled by like a confirmation bias believe this? Does Chuck Todd really believe this? How could you say something like that after your record is what it is? And again, I mean, people like, let's see if we can find some, actually. Let's see real quick if we can find some. I'm going to see if I can't grab, yeah, I'll just go to her. Because, I mean, I can't, because I'm not a journalist, but I can imagine being a journalist like Molly Hemingway and listening to that. All right, here we go. So here's NBC. Oh, see, I knew she was going to, I knew she would be the one to go to. Here is Molly Hemingway. She says more propaganda because obviously it's filled with it. But more propaganda from MSNBC. More propaganda from NBC. I mean, after all, they are NBC, right? Which is yet to explain what the Biden business, which has generated millions upon millions from foreign oligarchs, is. On a week with major advances about FBI improperly shutting down investigations of the same. Yeah, for those of you who don't understand what's going on, the FBI is absolutely covering up for the Bidens. And at the same time that we see the special counsel and the ramping up this grand jury attempt with the Records Act. Oh, and by the way, they're going to let Pence go. So Mike Pence is going to skate. They announced they're actually not going to prosecute Mike Pence while they're trying to get this grand jury to return an indictment against Donald Trump. So this is, I fear what's going to happen here. I mean, I always knew they were going to do this, but you would think during a time you have Durham, that's why you see people like Chuck Todd, they didn't cover the Durham report properly. There's nothing to cover. There's not two sides to this. I mean, there's nothing to debate. There's everything to cover. But there's not two sides to what was in the Durham report, folks. There's one side. The FBI is crooked. The Justice Department is crooked. And you would think after being condemned like that, they would at this point think twice about doing political lawfare against the president's political enemies. Main chief rival, who is currently beating him like a drum right now.
When you're preaching, I mean, you need a message that's not going to put the people in the choir behind you asleep. And, you know, this Biden crime family and Hunter Biden's laptop and this, that. As we say, if he's guilty of a crime.
This, that. Has he looked at the content of Hunter Biden's laptop? This, that. For crying out loud, Joe. Just what are clearly underage prostitutes alone is disgusting. You condone importing poor girls from Eastern Europe and Asia for the sex trafficking industry? You condone this?
Arresting, charging, and if a jury convicts him, a jury convicts him, so be it. But all these things about like the Biden crime family, this, that, the other, they keep pushing and they keep finding absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
And it ends up at the end of the day just being an embarrassment for them. And as Caddy said,
wow,
most Americans just don't care about this unless you're the wife of a Supreme Court justice that's talking about putting the Biden crime family on barges outside of Gitmo.
Oh, my God.
Absolutely. And when you see no response and you keep pushing something that you can't really bring anything out that would be even something perceived as a smoking gun, it takes away from the credibility.
What are I can't listen to him. What are bank records? I don't understand. What are bank records? Is this a joke? All right. Big breadcrumbs from a buried FBI. And by the way, we haven't even touched at all. Yeah, we got to do this. Here's a resist propaganda. We got to run this one. This one's the one I was looking for. We haven't even touched how these whistleblowers have been treated. Whistleblowers from the FBI, from the Justice Department, from the IRS, the never-ending investigation, which does, in fact, as that whistleblower claims, does, in fact, have a smoking gun. He's like, where's the smoking gun? Well, if you just ignore it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Here they are literally lying to their viewers about evidence that does or does not exist. They championed Alexander Vindman as a hero. Eric Caramello, whatever you call him. These are deep state hacks who have been looking to start a war with Vladimir Putin for 10 years. One of them, we could question whether or not he actually has an allegiance to the United States over Ukraine. And they champion these people as whistleblowers. Eric was not a whistleblower. Alexander Vindman committed a felony. That is a crime, what he did. Ray Texera, who dumped the documents, the Pentagon documents about Ukraine, they chased him down within 36 hours. Got the dogs out and everything and hunted that poor bastard down. He's not a hero to them. He's not a whistleblower hero, even though the content of what he leaked shed light on the true state of the war in Ukraine, which was a lie that MSNBC and NBC were helping to push onto the American people. They were helping the Biden administration push this lie. And here they are giving a platform to the dirtiest cop in modern American history. And these whistleblowers have had their careers destroyed. And Jonathan, I know it makes my stomach sick too. I understand. I know it's tough to watch, but I feel like these poor whistleblowers put themselves out there for nothing. And in a second, just bear with me. We're going to do one more. It's 44 seconds. We're going to do one more, and then we're going to go to the old slate of Meet the Press. Because, again, this is not a media outlet. I don't know what else to say. Listen to this softball. Could you imagine if you were one of the central figures in the Durham report and they're basically calling you out and the people who came after you? It implicated then director James Comey, who's right here. It implicated then deputy director Andrew McCabe and a bunch of upper level people on the 7th floor, Main Justice. Could you imagine being this guy and still saying what he's about to say right now? And could you imagine pretending to be a media outlet while letting James Comey say things like this?
You were a Republican most of your life, but voted for, and you may still consider yourself one, but voted for.
Which is not true. He's not a Republican most of his life. This is a load of crap. Republicans, the way they view themselves and the way that people in D.C. say, oh, I'm a Republican, so is Bob Mueller a Republican. This is a load of crap. James Comey is a deep state hack, and whatever party is more cozy with the deep state at that time, he will be allied with.
For Biden in 2020, do you intend to vote for him again, or is there anyone on the Republican side you might consider if it's not Trump?
It has to be Joe Biden. And
has to be Joe Biden
glad,
because the administrative state needs an empty suit. They need a guy who literally could slip on a sandbag and break his neck at any day. That's who they want. They want a tool, a puppet, an empty suit, a shell.
he's willing to serve. It has to be somebody committed to the rule of law, committed to the values of this country. And I'm not talking about policy. People can disagree about policy. There are things above those disagreements that all of us should think about the same way. The president must be someone who abides the law and our Constitution. And there's no one else but Joe Biden.
Holy crap. Weaponizing the Justice Department is abiding by the rule of law. They even sicked their dogs on Jim Justice because he's 20 points ahead of Joe Manchin and because he's an enemy of the Biden administration. Anyone who stands in their way gets under an indictment. And she's absolutely right. The regime that puts its political opponents in prison is worried about the party which doesn't imprison its political opponents getting in power again. Who knows what horrific and unethical, dangerous lengths they'll go to stop effective accountability going forward. Unbelievable. And I know Laura's giving me the warning here. I know. And I did say I would end it a little bit early for I don't know, Michelle. I saw your comment. I don't know. I don't know what world these people are living in. It's obviously very clearly a lie. They want to use the levers of government to imprison and to attack, to persecute and eliminate their political enemies. And they literally project onto them who they are. And nothing says that better than Russia collusion, because at the end of the day, the Durham report says that the Hillary Clinton campaign colluded with a Russian to dirty up their political opponent with the help of the FBI and the Justice Department, who then later used that stuff to engage in what could only be classified as a soft coup. All with Igor Danchenko's information. And everybody knows Christopher Steele's reputation. It shouldn't surprise anyone that Danchenko was the source of all that information. Because Judge Napolitano was right. The word from the British intelligence was that they just didn't even know what side that guy was on anymore. Once headed up the Russia desk at MI. So, wow. All right, don't miss the show Wednesday. We'll go over a little general election numbers, all right? And always a lot more where that came from. Give us some ideas. Where do you think we should go next? I kind of like the idea of keeping track of Florida pretty closely. I just feel that Florida's so key. I mean, the bottom line is, if you can't beat Trump in Florida, this is all pointless. All right, so I think Florida is just so important. But we could do Iowa. We could do New Hampshire. We could do South Carolina. It's up to you guys. Let me know. Maybe I'll throw out a little survey questionnaire and you tell me. And from there, so far we've done Texas. We've done Florida twice, more than twice, because we're technically tracked it over a couple of days to make sure that we weren't getting statistical noise. And there will be another update, by the way. So keep an eye out for that. The map will be updated from the interviews we collected on Sunday. All right. So, yeah, with that in mind, let me go before Laura kills me. And I will see you guys Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time. All the best. Deuces. Yeah, and tune in to Human Events at 2 p.m. right now with Jack Kosovic. I'll see you there. All the best.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but you don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette.